Om Vishwam Darpana Drishyamana Nagari Tulyan Nijantargatam Pashyannatmani Mayaya Bahirivod Bhutan Yatha Nidraya Yasakshat Kurute Prabodha Samaye Swatmanamevad Tasmai Shri Gurumurtaye Nama Idam Shri Dakshinamurtaye. Om Narayanam Padmabhuvam Vasishtham Shaktin cha Tatputra Parasharancha Vyasan Shukham Gaudapadam Mahantam Govinda Yogindra Mathasya Shishyam Shri Shankaracharya Mathasya Padma Padancha Hastamalakam cha Shishyam Tantotakam Vartikakaramanyaan Asmadgurun Santatamanatosmi. Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Parabrahmanishtam Swato Dharmanishtam Ahimsaikανishtam Swashishyai Sujushtam Yatinam Varishtham Gurunam Garishtham Dayananda Rupam Madacharya Namah Shri Paramathaya Sansaradhyasanashine Shrotriya Brahmanishtaya Tasmai Brahmavide Namaha Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Om. I welcome you all to the 8th class of this Fundamentals of Vedanta series. We started with the question of why study Vedanta. And what we said was that the benefit of this Vedanta study is the Purnatvam, the unconditional fulfillment that we are all seeking in life. But then for the study to be fruitful and to lead us to this Purnatvam, one needs to be an adhikari, a candidate with a certain fitness. So we said there are 3 factors involved in this adhikaritvam. One is that the candidate has to be a mumukshuhu, meaning a seeker of this purnatvam, a seeker of this unconditional fulfillment, not through various things in the world, but directly. The second part is that the seeker, the candidate, should be a jigyasuhu. A jigyasuhu meaning someone who sees the indispensable connection between the study of Vedanta and its benefit, which is the Purnatvam. Indispensable meaning irreplaceable. That requires a certain clarity of mind. And then the third factor is that this candidate should have certain preparedness of mind, certain qualifications. That is called chitta shuddhi. So then we looked into the question of how does an adhikari become an adhikari? And for that, it is necessary to answer 3 questions. How does the adhikari become a mumukshuhu, first of all? The seeker of this purnatvam, or alternatively, the seeker of moksha. The second question is, how does this adhikari become a jitnyasuhu? And then the third question is, how does this adhikari gain chitta shuddhi? So we are in the midst of answering the first question right now. It is important to have this global picture so that sometimes when we get into topics and subtopics, we may lose sight of where we are coming from. So it is important to keep the global picture in mind, because this is the path along which we are moving in this inquiry. So, how does this adhikari become a mumukshuhu, the seeker of this purnatvam, the seeker of moksha? And we said the adhikari becomes a mumukshuhu by seeking various experiences in life, by pursuing various goals, and then seeing what those goals can give me and what they cannot give me. So there is a learning process involved. And for this purpose, we got into an inquiry of the Purusharthas. What are the possible human goals? And we started off with Arthaha and Kamaha, seeking of security and seeking of pleasures that we said are common. Even animals do that. And then the other two Purusharthas, which is Dharma and Moksha, these two Purusharthas we come to know only through the Shastra. The Veda Purva teaches me about the Dharma Purushartha, and the Vedanta teaches me about Moksha Purushartha. Then we got into an inquiry of what is Dharma Purushartha. And we said we will look at three meanings. And we have already seen two meanings. We will look at the third meaning today. But let us recap what the first two meanings that we saw are. The first meaning that we saw was Chodana Lakshanaha Arthaha Dharmaha. This is taken from the Jaimini Sutras. Basically, the duties, values, and attitudes that are taught by the Veda Purva in the form of do's and don'ts, vidhihi and nishedhaha. These are Chodana Lakshanaha Arthaha Dharmaha. The duties comprise of yajna, danam, and tapaha. Yajna corresponding to the Panchamaha Yajna, as we saw, and tapaha comprising of various disciplines and austerities. And we said that if somebody implements this first meaning of dharma, then it leads to the second meaning of dharma. And what is the second meaning of dharma? We said that the second meaning of dharma is sustenance, well-being, harmony. Dharanat dharma. Dharanat dharma ityahuhu dharmo dharayati prajaha. Yasya dharana sanyuktaha sa dharmaha iti nishchayaha. So that which leads to sustenance, that which leads to harmony, that which leads to well-being is dharma. And in this context, we said that this harmony, sustenance, well-being is at multiple levels. At the level of the individual, at the level of the family, at the level of the society, and at the level of the environment. We looked at the impact that takes place on the individual harmony when somebody violates dharma, with an example of not speaking the truth. We saw how this leads to conflict, guilt, worry, and fear, and more importantly, a split within the personality, the knower-doer split that causes the person to become disintegrated. And how this disintegrated person becomes incapable of even pursuing legitimate goals in life and even enjoying the arthaha and kamaha that this person may already have accomplished. And then we got into this question of why one does wrong. Said there are two factors involved. One is the enemy and the other is the immunity. Just as in case of a disease, there are germs and there is immunity. So what is the enemy and what is the immunity? We looked at the parallels from the example of the disease to the situation that we're examining of why one succumbs to doing wrong. We said the same question was asked by Arjuna to Krishna, and Krishna had said kamaha eshaha, krodhaha eshaha. That kamaha and krodhaha are the culprits here. Kamaha meaning desire and krodhaha meaning anger. And Krishna called kamaha mahashanaha, mahapapma, meaning mahashanaha meaning something that has a very big diet. It is endless. As we saw, these desires, if we express happiness as a fraction of number of desires fulfilled by number of desires I have. And if I think that as I fulfill one desire after another, and then at some point I will reach this whole number one, which will give me happiness, then that is a like a mirage. As we are working on the numerator, trying to increase the numerator, somehow the denominator has a tendency to increase as well. The number of desires that I have keep growing. Mahashanaha. So now what happens is that as if this desire turns into an obsession, and the obsession turns into krodha, then it causes a person to lose the karya viveka. And that is what causes a person to commit wrong. Because as we saw in the Shankara Bhashyam, the part of Bhagavad Pada's commentary, there we saw that the smriti vibhramaha, that the samskaras, the various teachings given by the upadesha of the acharya and the shastra, they are stored in the form of samskaras in the mind. But at the time, in the environment of anger, this smriti, this remembrance from those samskaras fails to arise. And then the person proceeds to commit wrong. We said that not every desire is a problem. There are many auspicious desires that should actually be encouraged. Like this desire for study of Vedanta, the desire to do Dharma karyas, etc. So those are auspicious desires. They are not the problem. The type of desires that are talked about here are Dharma viruddha desires, those that go against Dharma and make one do a Dharma. Or desires that become an obsession. So all these types of desires are stated to be the problem. And then what is the immunity? We said that the vivekaha, this karya vivekaha is the immunity. And this vivekaha can be increased by contemplating on the values, by contemplating on how not following the value is actually hurting me. That is why this value of the value has to be seen as valuable to me, for me to adopt the value wholeheartedly. Then as we said, once one sees the value of the value, then it becomes extremely difficult or even impossible to violate the value. Then we looked at this factor of hygiene. And how does, just as in case of a disease, hygiene has a big role in preventing the entry of these germs. What is the equivalent in our scenario here? And we said that this hygiene is thought hygiene. And we looked at the shlokas from the Bhagavad Gītā where it said, Dhyayato vishayan pumsaha sangasteshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kamaha. So how is this kamaha, this desire born? It all starts with thoughts. And therefore, if there is a mind that is just contemplating on various things in the world and various objects in the world without any hygiene, then if these kinds of thoughts get in, then if one starts to brood upon the thoughts, then a certain fondness arises, and that fondness turns into kamaha. I want to possess the object. And therefore, then kamat krodho bhijayate, krodhat bhavati sammohaha, sammohat smriti vibhramaha, smriti bhramshat buddhinashaha, buddhinashat pranashyati. So basically, we saw this entire sequence, the 8-runged fall of a human being. Therefore, we said thought hygiene is very important, and an alertness of mind is required. And in order to see what kind of thoughts is the mind dwelling upon, and then prune the thoughts that are not likely to lead me in the right direction. We said satsangaha helps here because in an environment of satsangaha, one is contemplating on the higher thoughts that are aligned with the higher goals in life. And we saw that this pursuit of artha and kamaha needs to be in keeping with dharma, because when it is not in keeping with dharma, how it affects the individual, how it affects the family, how it affects the society and the environment. We saw all these things about the device addiction, social media addiction, etc., and how those are a result of not having enough austerity, not having the indriya nigraha, meaning a mastery, a sense of mastery over the sense organs. And at the family level, we saw how dharma promotes harmony, because there is a common goal for the entire family where the entire family can come together. And then how the performance of dharma, the performance of duty on part of one person in the family automatically results in the fulfillment of rights of somebody else. And this is not just true in the family, it is true in the society as well. How the performance of duty as a citizen fulfills the rights of the state, and how the performance of duty by the state fulfills the rights of the citizen. We said nothing is outside the purview of dharma. That is why dharma is this. Dharma has to be followed in every aspect of life. There is no such thing like the state is being outside the purview of dharma in the traditional view. And finally, coming to the environment, we saw all these examples of how the Artha Kama pendulum has swung too far in the other direction and has lost this balance with Dharma, and which is why all these effects that we saw, the undesirable effects, are happening on the environment. And this kind of a growth that happens at the expense of the environment is somewhat akin to cancerous growth, where the cancer grows in the body at the expense of the host and finally brings down the host, and the cancer also dies along with the host. So essentially, following dharma in all these aspects ensures that there is a certain harmony in all of these aspects of life. And that is why dharma in education becomes a very important thing. Because our current educational system is all geared towards material sciences. And the use of material science is basically for artha and kama. And the foundation, which should be dharma, is missing. Therefore, it's like it's like creating this building without a foundation. Basically, we are churning out people who are very good at accomplishing artha and kamaha. But then, if they are not aware of dharma, then all their actions can likely boomerang upon the individual, upon the family, upon the society, and upon the environment. And that is why dharma has to be the foundation of education. And there have to be the right role models, like we saw the role model of Ramaha, Harishchandraha, Shramana Kumar, etc. And we saw the value of values has to be taught. And that is when the half value turns into a full value, a fully assimilated value. And similarly, education has to provide the entire roadmap for life. And all of this was there in the traditional educational system, but has been uprooted and replaced with an educational system that purely focuses on materials. So this Artha Kama Dharma framework is very important. Artha and Kama create changes in these various dimensions that we saw. And it is Dharma that ensures that the changes are in keeping with the underlying laws. The changes are for the well-being, for the harmony. And if the Artha Kama pursuits go too far, then it results in all of this disharmony. And this is true in any of the domains. Now, there is a certain other aspect of dharma that we have to be aware of, and that is called the samanya versus vishesha dharma. As we saw, samanya dharma is based on all these common sense values. I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to be cheated. I don't want to be lied to. I don't want to be spoken to arrogantly. I know all these things. I don't need to be taught. And I know the others also expect the same kind of behavior from me. This also I don't need to be taught. So these are common sense values, samanya dharma, that every human being is expected to follow. And this is across the world. This is not just for Sanatana Dharmis or something. This is just across the world. Everybody knows this. We saw Atmanah Pratikulani Pareshan na Samacharet. But then let's take the example of Satyam Vada. Is this absolute? Is it inviolable? Meaning that does it unconditionally apply to all situations? And we say no. There are certain exceptions where Satyam Vada, speaking the truth, may not be the right thing to do. Let us take this example that there is this lady who is being chased by some goons. And she is trying to escape from those goons. And there is a forest. She's running around in the forest. And then she spots this Rishi sitting there. She tells him, please help me. So he says, go into that cottage. And very soon, the goons arrive on the scene and they ask the Rishi, did you see this lady? So at this point, should the Rishi say, Satyam Vadaha, this is what is Samanya Dharmaha, this is what I have been taught. And this is what I know by common sense. The Shastra has also said Satyam Vadaha, so I should do Satyam Vadaha. Should he say where the lady is? So this is an example where the Rishi tells that the lady went in some other direction. Or he says, I don't know. Either way. So in some cases, not saying the truth is the right thing to do. And this is known as Vishesha Dharma. There are exceptions. The exceptions may happen because of a particular time, a certain place, a certain situation, or for a certain individual. Ahimsa Paramo Dharma. Not hurting anybody is considered to be the highest dharma. And then let's take the example of a doctor who has to use a knife. There's this patient who has been given anesthesia and all that, and he's ready to be operated on, and the doctor suddenly says, Ahimsa Paramo Dharma, I'm not going to cut this patient. So again, the doctor has to do his duty because cutting the patient and removing the problem is going to make the patient feel better. So this is yet another example of Vishesha Dharma. Similarly, a soldier whose duty is to guard the boundary of the nation. We seeing somebody coming in, at that point, ahimsa is not his dharma. He has to use himsa if that is what is required for the safety of the nation that has been entrusted upon him. So this right and wrong is not an absolute thing. It varies from situation to situation, and one has to examine the situation to see what is the right course of action. And taking all this into account, if one does the right thing, then we say that there is absence of conflict, absence of guilt, and there is promotion of harmony and well-being. On the other hand, if one does something that is wrong, taking all this into account, then there will be guilt, there will be conflict, and it also leads to disturbance of the well-being and harmony. So this is with regards to Samanya Dharma and Vishesha Dharma. And at this point, we have completed the second meaning of Dharma also. And now we are going to enter into the third meaning of dharma. So we talked about all this conflict, guilt, etc., harmony, disharmony, etc. Is there any other effect of right and wrong actions? And the Vedas tell us that yes, there is. Right action, if you do right action, then it leads to conducive circumstances in the future, sukham in the future. And if you do wrong actions, it leads to dukkham in the future. Now, we are talking about a certain cause-effect relationship here. There's a cause, which is the nature of the action, whether it's right or wrong. And there's an effect, which is sukham or dukkham in the future. Now, there is a rule that comes from Nyaya Shastra, which is logic, that says that if there is a cause, that cause should immediately precede the effect. There should be no distance between the cause and the effect. For example, a seed can be said to be the cause of a sprout. In this situation, the first moment the sprout starts to appear, the seed is still there as the cause. Let's say somebody planted a seed and the seed got destroyed. Then there can be no sprout emerging out of it. So the cause has to immediately precede the effect. At the instant of time the effect is produced, the cause has to be there in just that preceding instance. It has to be there at least as long as that. There can be no intervening time gap. So let us take the statement that right action produces sukham in future, wrong action somehow produces dukkham in future. This cause and effect are separated by time. And in fact, it says that the sukham that is produced may not even be in this janma. It may be in a future janma also. The dukkham may be in a future janma also. So how is this right or wrong action in the past linked to sukham and dukkham, which is so far away? There can be no direct cause and effect relationship. So this is where we say that the right action produces something unseen. There is an unseen factor involved. The wrong action also produces something unseen. And this unseen factor persists until a point of time comes when it is ready to bear its result, which is the sukham or dukkham in future. And this unseen factor is called adrishtam. Adrishtam means that which is not seen. This is the unseen factor. So now, what are the types of this adrishtam? There is two types. One is called punyam and the other is papam. So both this punyam and papam are unseen factors. Right action produces this unseen punyam that persists. Wrong action produces this unseen papam that persists. And this is the third meaning of dharma. So this, as we saw, the first meaning of dharma, the duties, values, and attitudes, we saw how those are linked to the second meaning of dharma, which is harmony, well-being, etc. So similarly, the first meaning of dharma, which is duties, values, and attitudes, that is linked as a cause. That is the cause which produces this third meaning of dharma, which is the adrishtam. So there is this saying that says, Ashtadasha Puraneshu Vyasasya Vachanadvayam Paropakaram Punyaya Bhapaya Parapidanam. There are the Ashtadasha Puraneshu, in all these 18 Puranas. Vyasasya Vachanadvayam. Vyasacharya has basically repeatedly said two things. Paropakaram Punyaya Bhapaya Parapidanam. So this paropakaram punyaya. So paropakaram leads to punya. This right action that is reaching out, helping somebody else, or even following your duty that results in the well-being. That results in the production of punya, and parapidanam, something that gives grief, and all of these to somebody else, to the society, to the environment, etc. That results in papam, papaya parapidanam. Now, this meaning is further explained in the Vaisheshika Sutra. It says, Yato abhyudaya nishreyasa siddhihi sadharmaha. Yato abhyudaya nishreyasa siddhihi sadharmaha. Yataha, meaning from which, yasmat, from which, yataha, abhyudaya nishreyasa siddhihi sadharmaha, from which abhyudaya and nishreyasa arise, that is dharma. What is this abhyudaya and nishreyasa? Abhyudaya is basically worldly happiness. So that which is the cause of worldly happiness. And nishreyasaha is this absolute happiness, absolute fulfillment, purnatvam, moksha. So that from which both this absolute, this relative happiness of the world and this absolute fulfillment called moksha arise, that is dharma as per the Vaisheshika Sutra. And there we can see that it is this adrishtam, this punyam that leads to both the worldly happiness through artha and kamaha, and also this absolute fulfillment through moksha. It is basically a gateway to both. That is why it is said that dharma is the gateway to both the happiness that one can get through artha and kamaha, as well as the adhikaritvam that is required for moksha. So punyam is like this currency. It can be likened to a currency. Just as we can use our local currency for buying various things, similarly, this punyam that is gained through right action, it can be exchanged for conducive situations for sukham later in life. And on the other hand, papam is like this debit, which brings about unconducive situations in the future, dukkham. And we say that one may escape the local police if one does a wrong action. One may escape the local law enforcement, but then one cannot prevent this acquisition, this accumulation of papam. Even if one escapes the local law enforcement, this papam is there, and therefore one cannot escape this law that this papam will bring some kind of unconducive situation in the future. All cultures have this equivalent for the word luck. We can imagine that even 5,000 years ago, or even 10,000 years ago, whatever it be the case, in any culture, there may have been all these hunters, etc., who go out and they hunt something. And someday they have a small catch. If they catch something small and bring it home, and the wife says, oh, in their language, she might have said bad luck. And someday the hunter brings in something that is very large, and the whole family celebrates. We are saying we are so lucky today. But what the Veda says is there is nothing random. See, luck seems to have some kind of a randomness with it. But what the Veda says is that there is nothing random. Everything that happens in this world has a cause. Some of the causes are seen by us, and those seen causes are what science investigates in terms of the things that can be seen with the sense organs, and they produce all these scientific laws saying that if this factor is there, then this factor is produced. Or if this factor is produced, then this other factor must have been there as a cause. Similarly, what Veda says is that if something happens, then there is a cause for it. Even if you don't see the cause, there is still a cause for it. And that unseen cause is the adrishtam that we are talking about. So we have all these experiences that in our life, we have all experienced missing the bus. And we say bad luck. But what the Veda says is if you miss the bus, that is perhaps because of some unseen factor, unseen papam, that if you miss the bus and that might have resulted in losing something important. Sometimes missing the bus may actually result in some positive outcome. And we say that if there was an accident, for example, and you missed that bus, we say that it is because of some punyam. So there is nothing random. In fact, we can take an example of cricket here. That's the last over of the match, the last ball of the match. And maybe the opposing team needs 6 runs to win. It's an impossible situation for the opposing team. This bowler is bowling. And as he delivers the ball, as he's about to deliver the ball, his foot slips. Or perhaps the ball was a little wet and his hand slips. And what he delivers is a whimper. And the other side hits it for a 6. So this is one example where things went wrong. Now there's the other thing that is also possible. And in fact, the reason I bring it up is that I just read about this yesterday. That there was this match happening between 2 teams in Sri Lanka. And they are all both teenagers playing cricket. School cricket, basically. And this person delivered a ball. He's a 17-year-old who delivered a ball that was so wonderful. That is, it was unplayable that the batsman fell down. He couldn't understand the ball at all. And the stumps flew. This ball was so wonderful that this news appeared with the video of the delivery and all that. So this would have been yet another day, perhaps, for this boy. But then you could even say that there was some supporting punyam that perhaps made this boy so that made the news go around so much. But then this was not just some simple punyam for that person, because this video caught the eye of Dhoni. And now Dhoni has invited this teenager to be a net bowler for his team. So suddenly this person with that one ball, he has suddenly hit a jackpot. So such situations we say are because of some punyam that this person has done that is resulting in this worldly sukham. So now there is another thing about artha, kama and dharma that is very important. And that is what gets carried forward when a person dies. Now, Bhagavad Gītā is very clear that there is rebirth. There is no doubt about it. Vedanta is very clear that there is rebirth. And at this point, I'd like to take 2 shlokas from the Bhagavad Gītā. And you can also, if you have your copies, you can look at it. The first one is the 13th shloka from the 2nd chapter. 13th shloka from the 2nd chapter. It says, Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tatha dehantara praptihi dhiras tatrana muhyati. So what this says is Dehinaha, the 13th chapter of the 13th shloka of the 2nd chapter. Dehinaha asmin Yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara. So yatha asmin dehe, yatha asmin dehe, just as in this body, asmin dehe, dehinaha, for this embodied person, for this embodied one. So there is a distinction between the one who is embodied and the body. Asmin dehe yatha dehinaha. So in this body, just as the dehi, the one that is embodied, kaumaram yauvanam jara, that's just as this person goes through kaumaram. Kaumaram is boyhood or childhood. Yauvanam, youth, and jara, old age. Just as this person goes through kaumaram yauvanam jara, tatha dehantara praptihi धीरस तत्र न मुह्यति. तथा देहांतर praptihi, tatha dehantar praptihi. What Krishna is saying is, just as there is this youth, boyhood, childhood, youth, and old age, the embodied person goes, the embodied one goes through this experience of childhood, youth, and old age. Similarly, there is this dehantara praptihi, there is this attainment of another body after death. Then the next shloka is shloka 22 from the second chapter. And this shloka is in a different meter. Normally, all these Gita shlokas are in 1 meter. Dehi nosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvananjara tatha dehantara praptihi dhirastatra na muhyati. This is 1 meter. Anushtup chandaha. But this one is in a separate meter and therefore it has to be read in a different style. The Shloka 22 of chapter 2. Vasamsi jirnani yatha vihaya navani grihnati naroparani tatha sharirani vihaya jirnani anyani sanyati navani dehi. Here, Krishna gives the example of worn out clothes. Vasansi jirnani yatha vihaya. So, vasansi jirnani. Jirnani vasansi, the worn out dresses, Krishna says, worn out clothes. Yatha vihaya, just as a person discards these worn out clothes. Navani grihnati, navani grihnati naroparani. This person, aparani, navani grihnati. Aparani, naroparani, naraha, aparani, naraha, aparani, naraha, navani, aparani, grihnati. This person takes up new clothes, navani grihnati. Tatha sharirani vihaya jirnani, tatha jirnani sharirani vihaya, similarly discarding this worn out body. Anyani sanyati navani dehi, dehi anyani navani sharirani sanyati. This dehi takes up new bodies. So there is no doubt about this. All our the Shastra is very clear about this. So then the question is that this human being worked throughout life, accumulated all this athaha, kamaha, and dharmaha. Then what is carried forward? So we say only the dharma, this unseen punya papa that this person has accumulated in life, only that gets carried forward. This artha and kamaha are left behind. Artha grihe nivartante shmashane mitra bandhavaha sukrutam dushkritam chaiva gachantam anugacchati. What this says is, arthaha grihe nivartante. All this wealth, etc., it is left behind at home. Grihe nivartante. Shmashane mitra bandhavaha. Shmashana means this cremation ground. So his friends and relatives come all the way up to the cremation ground. But none of them accompany this person once this person leaves. Sukritam dushkritam chaiva. Sukritam here refers to the good actions. Sukritam, dushkritam, the bad actions, wrong actions. But as we saw, it is not the actions that accompany. This punya and papa, sukritam, dushkritam, punya and papa, gachantam anugachati, with the going one. Gachantam, they follow, anugachati, they follow this going one. They follow the one who's gone, who's going. So this mix of this punya and papa is what we say determines the next birth. The next birth, if there's an abundance of punya, basically we will see all of this in more detail when we see the law of karma. That is one of the subsequent topics. But this punyam this person has earned in life, this punyam goes and joins this bundle of punyam that this person has accumulated throughout past lives, called sanchita karma. We will see this later. And the papam also joins this bundle. And from that, a part fructifies, and that is what results in the future birth. If there is an abundance of punyam that is fructifying and the papam is minimal, then this person gets birth in as a devata. On the other hand, if there is a lot of abundance of papam that is fructifying and there is a little bit of punyam, then this person gets an animal or a plant janma. And if they are in balance, then one gets a human janma. So that's why the Prashnopanishad says here, Punyena punyan lokan nayati, papena papam ubhabhyam eva manushya lokam. So punyena punyam lokan nayati. The person is led to punya loka if there is an abundance of punyam. Papena papam. On the other hand, if there's an abundance of papam, then this person is led to a papaloka like naraka. Or even an animal life or a plant life is a result of this. Ubhabhyam eva manushya lokam. When there is a balance of punyam and papam, that is what results in manushya loka. And that is why in Manushya Loka, we say there will always be a combination of Sukham and Dukkham. Because this Papam and the karma that has fructified, that has led to this Manushya Janma is a mixture of Punyam and Papam. And that is why there is no human being whose life is all happiness, all Sukham. And there is no human being whose life is all only Dukkham. There will always be a combination of sukham and dukkha, and that is a result of the cause of this janma, which is a mixture of punyam and papa. And the Kathopanishad says here, yoni manye prapadyante sharirattvaya dehinaha sthanu manye nu sanyanti yatha karma yatha shrutam. So yonim anye prapadyante dehinaha, this embodied one, anye dehinaha, some of these embodied ones, they yonim anye prapadyante, they enter these various bodies, the wombs, it says, they enter these wombs. Sharirattvaya, for the sake of a body. And sthanum anyenu sanyanti, some enter these plant forms, etc. And this punyam and papam also accounts for the various disparities in human life. Because we see in our experience that there are some children who are born in extremely conducive circumstances, whereas others are born in very difficult circumstances. And we say that it is because of this punyam and papam that this disparity is explained. So there is a lot of impact that dharma has, the dharma that we are gaining in this life, or the adharma that has on future, on our future, as all these teachings indicate. And there is a certain context in the Mahabharata where there is an important teaching that we can look at. So the context is that there in this Yaksha Prashnaha, there is the story in the Mahabharata where the Yaksha, there is a certain Yaksha who was guarding a lake, and all these Pandavas come one by one and they try to drink water from the lake, and the Yaksha says, "No, you cannot drink water unless you answer my questions." But then they refuse to do that, and they drink water from the lake, and each one of them falls down dead. So there is first Nakulaha arrives, and then Sahadeva arrives, and then Bhima and Arjuna arrive. And each of them, as they drink water without the permission of the Yaksha, without answering the questions, then they fall down dead. And finally, Yudhishthira comes there. And Yudhishthira, he answers the questions that the Yaksha has, and then the Yaksha says, "Now you can. I'm happy that you have answered the questions, and you can basically revive one of your brothers." At that point, Yudhishthira, he asks Yudhishthira, "Who do you want to revive?" And Yudhishthira says, "I want to revive Nakula." So the Yaksha asks him, "You have Bhima and Arjuna, who are your own brothers, and who you need for the battle. So why do you want to revive Nakula?" Yudhishthira says that he wants to do this so that at least one son of the other mother is alive, Madari. So there's Yudhishthira is the son of Kunti, and he wants one son of Madri to also be alive. And that is why he says, "Revive Nakulaha." So in this context, Yudhishthira says, "Dharmo rakshati rakshitaha." He says, this is dharma. He says that this is the right thing to do. This is his duty. And he says, "Dharmo rakshati rakshitaha," means dharma that is protected, that dharma protects. Rakshitaha dharma rakshati. Dharma eva hato hanti, dharmo rakshati rakshitaha, tasmat dharman na tyajami, mano dharmo hato vadhit. He says, "Dharma eva hataha hanti." So hataha dharma hanti, that dharma which is destroyed, that which is not preserved, that destroys us. And rakshitaha dharma rakshati, that dharma which is protected, protects. Tasmat dharman na tyajami, therefore I will not give up dharma, he says. Mano dharmo hato vadhit, lest if I give up dharma, that dharma can destroy me. He just protected dharma protects. So this leads to the question of how is dharma protected? Naturally, the answer, we have been discussing all this, it is protected first of all by following dharma. When we say ignorance is also not an excuse for not following dharma. If one commits a dharma, if one commits a wrong action because of ignorance, then that also incurs this papa. And therefore, we say that if in a certain situation, if one is not sure of what is dharma and what is adharma, one should seek help from somebody in understanding the situation. That is why the Shastra, in fact, the portion of the Taittiriya Upanishad that we saw earlier that says Satyam Vada, etc., that itself says that if there is some confusion about what is dharma and what is adharma, then one should seek counsel from a Mahatma. The Mahatma will guide you along the right direction. So the first way of protecting dharma is to follow dharma, to do the anushtanam of dharma, to do the right things and avoid the wrong. The second way of protecting dharma is by protecting the dharmi, the one who is following the dharma. So here the ruler's duty, the one who is ruling, the person's duty, the ruler's duty becomes promotion, protection of dharma. If we were to say that we want to promote science, how is science promoted? Basically by giving grants to scientists, etc. If the scientists have a difficult time sustaining themselves, then they will abandon science and go for something else. So there has to be an environment that is created in which science is promoted and the scientists are given grants and they are supported. That is an environment in which science will flourish. There is no such thing called science that is apart from the scientists. Similarly, there is no such thing called dharma that is apart from the dharmis. And therefore, the way of promoting, the way of protecting dharma is to protect the dharmis. And protecting of the dharmis also means punishing those who are going against dharma. And only a ruler can do this. And therefore, the laws should be such that the ones who violate it, they are punished. And a common citizen cannot do it. This becomes the dharma of a ruler. But then purely controlling a society doesn't work. There has to be an education and assimilation within the society that the dharma is the right thing to do, right thing to follow. And therefore, the teacher's job also becomes very important. Because the teacher is the one, as we saw, achinoti hi shastrartham acharya. Achinoti hi shastrartham acharya sthapayatyapi. Swayam acharate yasmat tasmad acharya uchyate. Therefore, there have to be all these teachers who follow the dharma themselves. Swayam acharate yasmat. And acharya sthapayatyapi, who guide the others, who educate the others in terms of the value of the values, as we have seen. So all of this is important for protecting dharma. And the Bhagavad Gītā makes it very clear that Bhagavan himself is very, very interested in protecting dharma. But Sri Krishna says, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Krishna says, if dharma declines to such an extent, dharmasya glanir bhavati, he Bharata, he Arjuna, yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati, anytime there is this decline of dharma, abhyuthanam adharmasya, and there is this increase of adharma, then tada, in those situations, atmanam srijami, aham atmanam srijami, that time I take an avatara to correct the situation. In the entire universe, there's another way to look at it. Of course, there is this idea of an avatara that is presented by our Shastras. But there's also another way to look at it, that this body, for example, this body, the health of this body is dharma. It can be compared to dharma because it results in the well-being of the body. The health results in the well-being of this body. Similarly, this entire cosmos, this entire universe is like a complex organism. And dharma represents the health of this organism. And anytime there is a decline in the dharma of the body, if we take that scenario, then there are defense mechanisms in the body. For example, if some foreign particle enters my nose, immediately there is this sneezing. If something goes into my windpipe, immediately there is this coughing. All of these inbuilt mechanisms are meant for protection of the body. Similarly, if the body can have this protection, why not this universe? So this entire universe can be viewed as having a defense mechanism. So if this dharma declines to such an extent, then a defense mechanism kicks in. And there's the defense mechanisms try to restore dharma. And finally, there is this eventuality that Bhagavan himself descends in the form of an avatara to correct the situation. And there are innumerable examples given in Shastras where there have been massive declines in dharma in various yugas. And there have been corrective forces that come in to eliminate the negative forces. Krishna goes on to say, Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. So paritranaya sadhunam. So for the protection of the sadhus, who are the sadhus? The followers, those who have assimilated dharma, who are following dharma, the dharmis. Paritranaya sadhunam, for their protection. Vinashaya cha dushkritam, and for the destruction of those who are the dushkritas, who are the dushkritam of those who do wrong. For the destruction of those. The destruction of those may not mean physical destruction of those. It may actually mean correction of those people to make them dharmic. That is also a destruction of a dharma. But then, if that fails, then as a last resort, even himsa may be required. Vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya. For the restoration of dharma, sambhavami yuge yuge, I appear in one yuga after another. The yuge yuge need not mean just once in a yuga. It means whenever necessary. So Krishna did all of this. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam. And he also taught, as we saw. He took on the role of an acharya, and the Bhagavad Gītā is a teaching that Krishna gave in that situation. So we are talking about protection of dharma and how when dharma that is protected, the protected dharma, how it protects. So there is this question of whom does dharma protect from? And Pujya Swamiji here gives an interesting example. Says if you take the example of a wild animal, all the wild animal has to do is to just eat. To protect itself, all it has to do is just eat. If you take an example of a lion, it has nothing to be afraid of. Nothing in the jungle can attack it. So all it has to do is just eat. But if you take the example of a deer, then what the deer has to do is a deer has to eat to protect itself. But then it also has to protect itself from the other wild animals. So it has to do those two things. But then third, if we take the example of a human being, Pujya Swamiji says a human being has to do three things. One is a human being has to eat, like the deer. And a human being also has to protect himself from some of these other wild animals or other things that are not conducive to him from outside. When the human being has to do a third thing, which none of the other beings have to do. The human being has to protect himself from himself. Because the human being has this free will, as we saw, and therefore the choices the human being makes are very important. If he makes the wrong choices, he is in fact hurting himself. Atmaiva khyatmano bandhuhu atmaiva ripuratmanaha. Bhagavad Gītā says this, that the human being can be his worst enemy, and the human being can be his best friend. So that when the human being makes wrong choices, then the human being himself becomes his own enemy. And when the human being makes the right choices, then the human being becomes his own best friend. So dharma is required to protect oneself from oneself. So seeing all of this, basically the first meaning of dharma, that is duties, values and attitudes, how that leads to the second meaning, which is creation of this harmony, and how it also leads to this third meaning, which is this punyam, which is required for conducive situations in life. This dharma itself becomes a purushartha. So this is, in some ways, we can compare it, and we have seen this example of the rowing of a boat. This punyam that is created, it can be compared to the a flow of the river that is favorable. So if I'm trying to row the boat to reach a certain destination, if the river is flowing in the direction that I want to go, then it's favorable. So punyam creates such favorable situations. On the other hand, papam creates situation that is likened to the flow of the river in the opposite direction. So not only in worldly situations, so clearly in worldly situations we have seen the benefit of punyam and papam, and the difficulties that papam can cause. But then even on the spiritual path, we say that this punyam and the avoidance of papam is important. Because just as in case of the flow of the river, if somebody is trying to row in a direction to progress spiritually, the flow of the river can aid that progress. And that is why this punyam becomes important even in the spiritual path. And even for gaining this adhikaritvam, as we saw, this entire discussion in the context of adhikaritvam. And therefore, we say that even for gaining this adhikaritvam, punyam is required, and therefore start earning punyam. We will look at this in more detail because there is a particular kind of punyam that one needs to earn in order to gain this adhikaritvam. There are two kinds of punyam. One is this worldly punyam and the other is spiritual punyam. And we will see this in more detail in the next class. But for now, we have seen how dharma becomes a purushartha, and we have also related it to conducive situations in life and how these conducive situations are important even for adhikaritva. So with this, I will conclude and we'll pick up the thread in the next class. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. So we may have a few minutes for any comments or questions.
Vishwanathan here again. Able? Am I audible?
Sorry, I'm not able to hear you. Someone trying to speak? Yeah.
Am I audible? Vishwanathan here.
Yeah, we can try. There is some, the volume is a bit low, but we can try.
Yeah. Today's class, I got only one question. One of the topic what has been touched upon was the mastery of sense of organs, which is very critical for attaining the Purnatvam. That's what my understanding. Without these sense under control, rest of the things will not fall in place. So going forward in the next class, anything you will be talking on this subject that you can clarify. I don't want you to
Sure, sure.
take your time.
Yes.
That is the first point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the second one, slightly out of the context, which I thought, which is, bothering me for, not bothering, maybe this questions comes to my mind. What is the purpose of this creation of this entire universe by the God? These two, I'm not getting any clarity. If you can throw some light on this, maybe in this class or maybe the next class. These are two questions from my side.
Okay. So I'll try to briefly touch upon the two questions you have asked. One is about this mastery over sense organs. So as we said, this adhikari has three aspects, right? One is this mumukshutvam. One has to be a seeker of purnatvam. The second is this adhikari should be a jigyasu, should see the indispensable connection between the study of Vedanta and this purnatvam. And the third is that this adhikari needs certain qualifications known as chitta shuddhihi. So this a certain mastery over the sense organs is required, and that is one of the qualifications that is a part of this chitta shuddhi. And that we will see in more detail in one of the subsequent classes. Basically, the idea being that if, like we saw, that this thought hygiene is required, right? If there is no thought hygiene, then basically all kinds of garbage can enter the mind and completely lead one astray. And the entry point is in some ways the sense organs, right? So if one has a high degree of development of thought hygiene, then no matter what the sense organs bring into the mind, right, one can still prune it, right? But if one still doesn't have that kind of accomplishment of the mind, right, and if one is in an environment where garbage can enter the mind, but if one doesn't have that degree of the mastery over the mind, then one has to physically remove oneself from that situation. And that is where a certain mastery of the sense organs is also required. So we will look at this in more detail in the subsequent one. And with regards to the purpose of creation, what Vedanta says is that Ishvara, right? Ishvara, Parameshvara, is the one who projects this creation. And the projection of this creation cannot be without a cause. Like we said, every effect has a cause, right? There's nothing that happens anywhere without a cause. And this is one place where scientists are still struggling. They have not found. They say the Big Bang happened. What happened? What caused the Big Bang? No answer. Right? There is no answer. But what Vedanta says is that Ishvara was there. Ishvara has always been there. There was no time when Ishvara was not there. The creation may come and go, but Ishvara has always been there. And this creation emerges out of Ishvara. Just as a dream emerges out of the dream and out of the sleeper. The sleeper is sleeping, and then suddenly this dream emerges. So similarly, what Vedanta says is that if you think about deep sleep, right? Our deep sleep state, that was what was there before creation. You were like deep sleep. You were also there before this creation. Ishvara was also there. All the jivas were there. Ishvara was there before the creation. So it is not that you got created and I got created. There was never a time when you were not there. There was never a time when I was not there. And all of us were there in Ishvara, in some kind of a latent state. Now, what happens is that, as we said, all of these jivas have a lot of karmas that they have gathered throughout their lives. Right? There is all this punya papa that is accumulated by each jiva. So now Ishvara has to provide an environment where the jiva can get the experiences, the sukham and dukkham from the punya papas. The punya papas have to lead to a result. As we saw, the punyam has to produce some conducive sukham in the future. The papam has to produce some dukkham in the future. That is the purpose of existence of the punya papas. So each jiva's punya papas are there, and some of them begin to fructify. And as the punya papas of these jivas begin to fructify, Ishvara has to produce this creation. in order to give the experiences to the jiva that arise from their punya papas. So why did this creation come about? Because there was a prior creation in which all the jivas that were there, they gained all of these punya papas. And then at some point when those punya papas basically uh, it got temporary, there's a temporary reprieve, just as we go to deep sleep. After waking up, we go to deep sleep. So similarly, the whole creation, you can think of a sleep for that creation. So the sleep is for us, just as it's in between two waking states, there is deep sleep. So similarly, in between two creations, there is this deep sleep for the creation. So this Big Bang, etc., they are just, thinking this is the beginning. What we say, this, even if there was this Big Bang that they talk about it, the cause for the Big Bang, we talk about the cause for the Big Bang as being the Punya Papas. And how did these Punya Papas arise? Because there was a prior creation in which these jivas accumulated the Punya Papas. And why was this prior creation? Because there was a prior creation. So there was basically in Vedanta, as per the description of the Vedas, there was never a first creation. This has always been there because Ishvara, there was never a time when Ishvara was not there. So this is the second part of your question.
I have one follow-up question on this.
Yeah.
If the present environment was created to expend the previous punya and papam that I earned, by induction, if we keep going back, was there a clean slate where I started with nothing and then I mean, what was the first ever punya or papa that I earned, and how did I
There
earn that?
was
And what
there was never this clean slate. In fact, you as a jiva, I as a jiva, all of us on this call, we are all jivas. What Vedanta says is there was never a time when you were not there. And there was never a time when you began, basically. You've always been there, expressing in various forms. Maybe in some janma, a jiva is in the form of a lizard. And then that lizard dies in another janma based on the punya papas. It may take the form of an elephant, or it may become a microbe or whatever, right? So it keeps changing all of these forms. It keeps changing all of these forms. And this whole process is would be never ending. It would actually never end. The only possibility of this ending is through the rise of Atma Jnanam.
This wild animals, let's say lizard to elephant or whatever, do they earn this papam and punya because they do not have free will?
Exactly. So we say, a very good point. So we say that in an animal janma, one can only expend the prior papam and punyam. There's no way of earning new papam and punyam. New papam and punyam can only be earned in a human janma. So that is why we say that if you see a mosquito, right, the fact that the mosquito is there, right, is because of its past punyam and papam, right? And where would that punyam and papam have come from? Because it had some prior human janma in which it earned that punyam and papam. Otherwise, there is no way to earn this punyam and papam.
Correct. Correct. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sir, thank you so much.
So shall we conclude then?
Yes.
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.